At the start of this month, the New York Knicks were easily the worst defensive team in the entire league. They couldn't get any stops whatsoever. Had lost 9 of 11 games, just absolutely getting lit up on the defensive side of the floor. But ever since then, they have looked completely different, and it's a big reason why they have been able to win their last 5 games. I'm your host, Dylan Backer. This is Fireside Knicks, and I'm going to dive right into all of that stuff right now. So over the course of these last 5 games, a big reason why they have been able to win them in such dominant fashion is because of their defense. In these 5 wins, in 4 of them, they have held their opponents to under 100 points, and before that, they had allowed their opponents to score 110 points or more in 18 straight games. So they were just really bad defensively for an extended period of time, and quite frankly, for most of the season. Especially three-point defense. Three-point defense had been giving them a lot of problems throughout the start of the year. Even when they started the year 23-9, that was one of their biggest issues. They had really no perimeter defense whatsoever. They kind of got lucky that teams were missing shots, and they got lucky that their offense was just on par with everything that they were hoping for it would be. But then when their offense stalled during that little slump, their bad defense, I should say, was exposed because they couldn't score, they couldn't make up for it on offense, and they were just getting lit up on the defensive side, giving up way too many threes, way too many easy shots. Teams were just walking them down. It was really that simple. And I think the biggest time that it was exposed was against the Dallas Mavericks, when at home they got walked down by an injured Mavericks team, a team that basically had Cooper Flag and a bunch of guys who don't even play that many minutes or aren't even in their rotation like that. They got walked down, lost by 30 at MSG. Crowd was booing them like crazy. That was kind of the rude awakening for them. And then after that, Jalen Brunson had that players only meeting, or as Josh Hart likes to put it, just a little meeting. He doesn't like to call it a players only meeting, but we can call it whatever we want. Point is, the players met together and tried to do something to figure out what the heck is going on with this team. And it seems like they're putting their egos aside and are just trying to play some team basketball. And that's what I'm really enjoying so far out of this recent stretch. Because on defense, they look so much more cohesive, much more connected, much more in sync. They're more communicative. That's really what we've been wanting out of this group, because we know with the talent they have that they are able to be a good defensive team. When you have OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, Deuce McBride, Mitchell Robinson all playing significant minutes for this team, you should be a solid defensive group. And we're seeing other guys who aren't exactly known for their defense also making an impact. More specifically, Jalen Brunson has been very solid on the defensive side during this recent winning streak. Landry Shamet returning has been huge for the Knicks, not just for his shooting, but his activity on the defensive side, I should say. His activity is kind of crazy. I didn't realize that Shamet was that good of a defensive player until I saw him actually getting some more minutes for us. I always knew him as more of like a sharpshooter, guy who can give you some buckets here and there, but if he's going to play defense the way he's playing, he deserves more minutes. And quite frankly, it is a big reason why Shamet is playing more minutes ahead of Jordan Clarkson, and why Jordan Clarkson is not in the rotation currently, because you need the defense. You need defense to, help you win these games, get you some big stops, go on big runs. And so far, guys like that are providing that. And I think Mike Brown is finally realizing the guys who are actually making the impact on that end of the floor. And that's what I like seeing. I like seeing the guys who are consistently getting the job done. I'm sick of seeing guys get minutes who are just not really being much of an impact, such as like Gershon Yabusele, for example. I know he kind of has to play him a little bit to kind of showcase some trade value a little bit, but the on-court impact with him is just simply not there on either end of the floor. He's struggling defensively, and he's obviously struggling offensively. Like I mentioned, Jordan Clarkson before, yeah, he's a solid scorer in spurts, but the defense has just not been there for him this year, and that's why he's out of the rotation currently. It sucks for him, I know. I know a lot of fans like him. I kind of grown to like him a little bit, even though I wasn't a big fan of his game in years past, but it kind of had to be done, and I think it was a good decision, because look, they're winning these games as a result, and they're not just beating like bad teams either. Yes, they've had a relatively light schedule in this stretch, but they went up 20 on the Philadelphia 76ers. They ended up outscoring the Toronto Raptors by 30 in the second half, and then they beat a decent Portland Trailblazers team and held them to under 100 points. So it isn't just them beating up on like the Brooklyn Nets over and over and over. No, they're starting to show that they can actually hang with the top of the Eastern Conference again, which is huge, because during that losing streak, we started to wonder really what was the ceiling for this team. Where was this team headed? Where were they really going to be? Were they going to just be a inconsistent group all year? I don't really know. Maybe this team is actually very good and they just had a very bad slump where it really extended much longer than it really should have, but it seems like they've put it past them now, and I'm really happy to see that. And really what speaks volumes too are some of the metrics here with the defense, because during that 2-9 stretch, they were 29th in defensive rating. Only the Utah Jazz had a worse defensive rating than them. So basically, the Knicks were essentially as good at defense. I can't even speak, but as good at defense as one of the worst teams in the entire league. And the Knicks were, well above 500 and in playoff position. But when your defense is that bad, you're not going to be winning games like that. And that showed when they went 2-9 over that 11-game stretch, right? But ever since then, ever since the players only meeting, or whatever you want to, term it as, in this 5-game winning streak, they are first in defensive rating, and by a pretty wide margin too. It's in the 90s. I'm pretty sure it's the only team in the league at this point, as far as when I'm recording this video, that it's even that low. Their defensive rating overall on the season has jumped from like 18th to 12th now. So not only are they close to being a top 10 team in both offense and defense, but it seems like they've just really figured things out. And that's been a key. And the two key catalysts behind this, I know I mentioned, some of the other guys like Landry Shamet and Jalen Brunson before, but the two main catalysts behind this defensive shift in the energy is OG Anunoby and Mitchell Robinson. Those two guys right there have really shown why they're so valuable to the team. And I know people are going to say, oh, but I said I would trade OG for Giannis. Listen, that is a Giannis discussion. And when it comes to as far as Giannis, I would let go of anybody except Jalen Brunson. This is Giannis we're talking about. That is an MVP candidate. All bets are off at that point. But I'm not going to talk about Giannis this episode. We've talked about him quite a lot lately. I'm going to keep it strictly about the guys that are currently on the team right now. And as back to what I was saying before, about OG Anunoby and Mitchell Robinson, those two guys have really put in the work defensively, and that's why, as a group, they are doing so much better on that end of the floor. OG Anunoby had 8 stocks against the Toronto Raptors, his former team, 6 steals, 2 blocks to be exact. That's insane. And we know Mitchell Robinson has been a really good defensive presence, really, whenever he's out there. But during this stretch, it's really showing. He's been getting those offensive rebounds still, and he's still making an impact on the glass defensively. Look at the Philadelphia 76ers game, for example, right? Knicks were trailing by 3 in the third quarter, and Karl-Anthony Towns was in foul trouble. Karl-Anthony Towns subbed out of the game when they were trailing by 3. Mitchell Robinson came in the game, and they ripped off a 25-9 run. A run that was big enough for them to hold on to that lead and end up winning the game. Yes, I know they only won the game by 3, but that run right there was why they won the game, because they made such a big cushion that it was just not enough for Philly to come back to overcome, right? And then look at the other games. Look at Sacramento, for example. Karl-Anthony Towns wasn't awful against Sacramento, don't get me wrong, but he was a little inconsistent in the first half, and then in the second half, he kind of sparked the little run a little bit by making a couple threes. But when Mitchell Robinson stepped out on the floor, and so did Deuce McBride, and you surrounded Jalen Brunson with 4 defenders, they ripped off a huge run, and the Knicks ended up winning that game by 16 when it was tied entering the fourth quarter. So that's just a couple examples right there. Obviously, the Toronto Raptors game was a little different. I thought Karl-Anthony Towns actually was pretty solid against Toronto. Yes, his shooting was really not there at all. It was like 2 for 11, but the rebounding was very important. He had 22 rebounds against the Raptors, and then he had 20 rebounds last night against the Portland Trailblazers. So, maybe while his shot is not falling, at least he's making an impact in areas you need him to make an impact in, such as the rebounding and all that stuff, especially when the Knicks are still trying to manage Mitchell Robinson's injury load, and they're trying to really make sure that he stays healthy for the down the stretch of the season and into the postseason. So I can commend Towns for that, for actually stepping up and putting the ego aside a little bit, letting go of the wanting the ball, wanting more touches, or getting upset about your shot not falling or not getting the whistle, whatever it may be, and just getting the dirty work done, right? Because at the end of the day, defense is what's going to win championships. And if the Knicks do have serious title aspirations this year, they're going to have to be a good defensive team. You're not going to get away with giving up too many threes and being one of the worst perimeter defensive teams in the entire league if you want to win a title. You're not going to get away with that, right? We see when is a team ever, a team who's won a title, when are they ever a bad defensive team, like anything below like 12th in the league or something like that? It never happens, right? 9 times out of 10, the champion of the league is always top 10 in both offense and defense. It's almost always that way, and the Knicks have the potential to do that. We saw how good their offense was at the start of the year. We've seen how good their offense has been of late. We know the potential the offense has. We know that group is going to put up a lot of points. It's the defense that had always been the biggest concern, especially when Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns, your two best players, are not exactly known for their defense. They're not good defenders. That's a problem, right? But if the rest of the guys can actually step up and continue to make an impact like this, and at the end of the day, it's all about effort. You know, if the Knicks actually try to play defense, they can be a good defensive team. I said that a few games ago, and I stand by that point. It's kind of proven my point over these last few games. You know, the Knicks supposedly don't have a bunch of good defenders outside of the guys I named earlier in this episode, but they have held their opponents to under 100 points in 4 of the last 5 games and have really stepped up on that end of the floor, and they're blowing out opponents again. They're looking like the Knicks again. And that is something that I really am glad to see at this point in the year, right before the trade deadline. Yes, I know that a lot of the rumors have been mostly about Giannis, but if Giannis does not end up coming here, it is what it is. This group can figure things out. I never gave up on this group. I want to make that clear. As much as I had been vouching for a shakeup and vouching for pieces to be moved and you know, vouching to make that all-in move for Giannis, this is a good team. I never thought it was a bad team. A bad team, you're looking at like lottery teams, right? This is a good team. I just thought it was fundamentally flawed based on the results we were seeing throughout the first 40 or so games. But it's changed. Right now, they're looking a lot better. And if this is the version of them that we're going to get moving forward, then my opinion may change and the outlook may change for them. It changes a lot for this team. You know, it goes from pretty much everybody stepping up. We talked about Mikal Bridges getting 30 points against the Raptors. That's huge right there. If you can get a version of him like that more often, that changes so much for the Knicks on the offensive side. But on the defensive side, it always needed to be better. It needed to be improved. Because at the end of the day, you can put up as many points as you want, but if you suck on the defensive end, it isn't going to matter, right? So that's the big thing right now. If they continue to play defense at this high of a level with this much intensity and this much energy and this much cohesion, then they'll be in a good spot. I am confident about that. I'm hoping that they can continue to win these games convincingly. They have a big one coming up against the Lakers and then some other big games ahead as well, such as the Pistons ahead as well. You know, they got some tough ones coming up. But the Knicks are showing that they can hang around with these guys again. They're looking good. I want it to continue, though. I'm not going to, overreact over 5 games. I'm not going to fully draw a final conclusion over 5 games because, things could easily slip again. Things could change right before the trade deadline. Maybe certain guys get moved and it changes the way that the rotation is going to look. So much can happen over the course of the next few days, and that's what I'm excited to see. I'm also a little anxious about it, but I'm excited to see what will happen over the course of the next few days as the trade deadline looms, because this recent stretch right here does change quite a bit for what the Knicks' plans at the deadline may exactly be. But that's really all I wanted to talk about today. I really wanted to get into the defense and stuff because it's been a big catalyst behind this winning streak. And I'm just glad to see that they're playing so much better on that end of the floor. And they're winning games again because I miss talking about wins. I really did not like having to talk about them losing games or them really struggling. I hated doing that. I don't like to rip into this team. I just like to keep it honest. I like to be real about it. If they're struggling, I'm going to point it out. I'm not going to, sugarcoat around it. But when they're winning games like this, I'm not going to ignore it either. I really do enjoy talking about them winning, so that's really what I'm here to do. But anyways, guys, I really hope you did enjoy this video. You can leave a like, comment, and subscribe to this YouTube channel, and you can also follow us on all of our social media platforms. We are on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and of course, like I just said, this YouTube page that you just watched the video on. You can also follow my personal Twitter account. It is at DylanBackerESM. I will leave the link in the description. This is Fireside Knicks, and we hope to see you guys in the next episode. Peace out, and let's go Knicks.